The New York Rangers are lifeless zombies.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1471 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the number one sports podcast network. So last night, the New York Rangers played a hockey game, which also means that the New York Rangers lost a hockey game, this time to the San Jose Sharks by a final score of 3-1. And a whole lot to talk about here as far as all the different things that the Rangers did wrong, not the least of which was this disturbing trend that's gotten worse and worse as the season has progressed here, that this team is just never ready to play hockey at the opening faceoff. They are just never ready to go. It's always a team with the mentality of sticking their toe in the water and just seeing how it's going to go. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. We're also going to call them out for the just bounty of terrible penalties that they took in this game. I mean, they do that a lot anyway, and that's another thing that's gotten worse and worse as the season has progressed here. But man, it was on a whole other level last night. But we begin by calling them out. A lot of calling out today. We begin by calling them out for just a complete lack of human emotion. These guys are zombies. They are robots. They look like they would rather be anywhere else in the world. To begin with, terrible start to this game. They take two unnecessary penalties. They're down 2-0 after giving up a couple of power play goals faster than you can blink. Now, again, we're going to elaborate on that a little bit later in today's episode, talk about the horrible start that this team obviously had, but just wanted to kind of set the stage for what's to come here. And the point that I'm about to make, that again, this team plays with zero emotion. So it's 2-0. First time all season, or he's probably done it before, but the first time that I can remember Mike Sullivan taking a timeout to, I guess, give his team a kick in the you-know-what and try to snap them out of it and try to get them going. I mean, it would have been nice if he could have done that in the locker room, or if these players could take it upon themselves to be ready at the start of the game. But nonetheless, he takes the timeout down 2-0. And nobody but Sullivan during this meeting on the bench here is saying a word. And I understand, players, they're not going to want to talk over their head coach, right? They're going to listen to what he wants to say. But did you see the Rangers when this was going on here? Everybody's there. Everybody just has like a faraway look in their face. Nobody's got any intensity. Nobody even looks like they want to be there. Now, granted, you couldn't see all their faces due to the camera angle because some of them, have their head turned away from the camera and they're looking at Sullivan and listening to him. But, I look at guys like JT Miller. I look at guys like Mika Zibanejad. I look at guys like Artemi Panarin. You could clearly see their three faces during this, and there's just not a whole lot going on there. Now, I mean, there's various reasons for that. I mean, with Panarin, he's basically a dead man walking as far as his Ranger career is concerned, and he knows it, and he's going to get traded. But, man, there's just not a whole lot going on here. There's just very little intensity, very little to believe that anybody is going to pick up their game at this point. Did anybody think that, like, when the Rangers called this time out here, that they were going to come back and win this game? There was a better chance of the Rangers not scoring 2 goals, which San Jose had already scored 2 goals. There was a better chance of them not scoring 2 goals than there was of them coming back to win this game. And indeed, they lost this game 3-1. So they did not get to 2 goals. The Sharks, what was it, like 3 minutes into the game, had already scored enough goals that the Rangers weren't going to come back and tie the game or obviously win it. So no intensity, no fire during this timeout, after this timeout, nothing to be found whatsoever. Then, about midway through the first period, we had a situation where I believe the puck was frozen by the Sharks goalie, and Noah Laba got into it with one of his opponents, and just a very brief shoving match there. And, it fizzled out pretty quickly. But we have to give an award to Noah Laba. He was the first New York Ranger on this night to show a human emotion, something where you actually believe that these guys, breathe oxygen and drink water, right? Otherwise, it was just completely robotic up to this point in this game. The Rangers just going through the motions. The definition of a team going through the motions is this first period played by the New York Rangers, where they obviously dug that hole and, obviously do not have the firepower to climb out of it. But Noah Laba, just with a little push there, the first Ranger to show any kind of human emotion. Then there was another instance here, and again, we're going to list all the instances where the Rangers actually showed a little bit of fire, a little bit of emotion. So we go on a little bit later. It's 3-0. The Rangers' fourth line, which unironically was their best line on this game. The line of Anton Bleed, Sam Carrick, and Taylor Radish was probably the Rangers' best line in this game, and that will give you an idea of where we're at right now and just how far this team has fallen. But they did show a little emotion after Sam Carrick scored a blue-collar goal. Very rare to see the Rangers score a blue-collar goal. Very rare to see the Rangers score a goal of any kind in recent history here, for the most part this season. But even here, I mean, like you look at the way these guys are celebrating this goal, and it's just like, come on, can we snap out of it a little bit? Now, I understand to this point in the game, the Rangers have not played very well, and even after this goal is scored, it's still 3-1. So you don't want to celebrate like you just won the Stanley Cup. I understand that, but can somebody give me something? Can somebody yell? Can somebody pump their fist? Can somebody fire up the bench as they're going down, the line at the bench? There was none of that either. And of course, that ended up being the only goal that the Rangers scored in this game. As far as other instances where emotion was shown, there was an instance where Carson Soucy took a penalty. He basically got like slingshotted into the corner, and there was a whistle, and he got up and went after his guy. He took a penalty for it, and we are going to crush the Rangers for the amount of unnecessary penalties that they took in this game. I'll actually give Soucy a little bit of a break on this one, though, just because at this point, you're just starved to see anybody show any kind of competitive fire, any kind of emotion whatsoever. At least we got it from Soucy, even if it did result in a penalty. And then, to really call them out even further on this, there was another situation that really bothered me. It was at the end of the second period, the horn sounds, and you've got Mika Zibanejad being shoved in the back by Desjardins. He didn't really do anything about it. He turned around and just kind of looked confused. And I mean, he did say something to him, but, there's not enough of a pushback here, literally or figuratively. And, Gavrikov comes in there, he steps between them, but he doesn't really say or do anything either. Like, can somebody just give me something? This guy, and it's not like the Sharks player did a malicious shove on Mika Zibanejad, but you don't have to stand for that kind of nonsense. The period was over. Mika hadn't done anything wrong. The puck was near the Sharks' net. The Rangers actually had a little bit of a scoring chance at the end of the second period, and he's getting shoved from behind. So go back after them. Why don't they do it? They just don't do it. And this is the team that's going to play with no BS, and they're going to play with some FU. That's a bunch of BS in and of itself, and we could go on and on about that. We'll save that topic for another day. I guess we're kind of doing that. This is kind of like an all-encompassing episode where we just illustrate how the Rangers never play with any no BS, never play with any FU. But it's funny, then you get to a situation where one of the announcers, I think it was John Giannone, he mentioned that in the second intermission, more so than the first intermission, the Rangers seem to have a little bit more pep in their step. That's a very low bar to clear. And I don't doubt his assessment. He's down there and he gets to see everything up close and personal most games. If it was Giannone, I'm forgetting which announcer said that. But whoever said it, I mean, yeah, maybe that was true. Maybe that was the case. There was a little bit more energy. But again, we are talking about a bar that is underground in terms of a bar that you need to clear to raise the intensity from where the Rangers were in the first period and into the first intermission there. Something else I got to mention when it comes to just this complete lack of intensity, this complete lack of competitive fire shown by the Rangers in this game and shown by them a lot recently as well. When you have as little talent, as little depth, as little scoring as this Ranger team has, you really need to make up for it in other areas. And it's not impossible. We saw them semi-do this in the early parts of the season when they were at least, lingering around the playoff picture. They made up for their lack of offense in some other areas. You have to be able to defend well. And I think, again, the first 2 months of the season, I think the Rangers were mostly doing that. They that blue line group, that defenseman group, they quite often overachieved early this season. And I feel like, overall team defense and structure was certainly better this year than last year. That's all gone away. They don't defend anymore, and they make too many mistakes. You also must dial up the intensity. And we just spent the last 8 minutes talking about how there's a complete lack of intensity, complete lack of emotion, fire, whatever you want to call it. It just isn't there. It just is not there with this Ranger team. And you also need to limit your mistakes. And the Rangers don't do that either. They have horrible turnovers. And in this game, they took 7 penalties. They gave the Sharks 7 power play opportunities. More on that in a little bit. But again, to summarize here, you got to do all the little things right, whether that's staying out of the penalty box, whether that's playing structured defensive hockey, whether that's dialing up the intensity and getting in people's faces. You have to do all these little things to make up for your lack of offense, your lack of depth, and the Rangers do none of these things. And you see the result. What do they have, 2 wins in their last 13 games or whatever it is at this point? It's embarrassing. All right, we're going to keep everything rolling in a second. We're going to call them out for never being ready to play. We're going to really dissect the opening couple of minutes of this game. I think you guys are going to like this. We'll get to that and call out every Ranger responsible for this team falling into an early hole. We will do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you will see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets that you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. All right, we also just want to give a big shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting this podcast through thick and thin, all the ups and downs of New York Ranger hockey. Thank you for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not done so already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. There is access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On New York Rangers, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. There's also an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of the show. Tap the link in the show notes to learn more. And for the everydayers, we're going to keep this train rolling here as we continue to watch Ranger hockey. They got a busy week ahead. They play Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Monday, they are at home against the Bruins, so whatever happens there, we'll be back to discuss it on the next episode of Locked On New York Rangers. But let's go ahead and call them out for just having a brutal start to this game. I mean, we sort of did a little bit of that in the last section, but we're going to really dive into it here, really break down some of these plays. And I'm going to start this section by repeating something that I said in an episode not too long ago. So bear with me if you've heard this before, but I think it really needs to be said again because they really need to be called out for this. This New York Ranger team is never, ever, 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 ever ready to play hockey at the start of a game. The opening faceoff, the puck drops, and like I said earlier, they just kind of stick their toe in the water and, okay, let's just see how it goes tonight. And before they know it, the team that they're playing is hungrier, more intense, and they're sensing that the Rangers may not be at their best at the start of the game, and that this is a weak team and a bad team, and they can jump all over them early, and most teams do it, and we certainly saw the Sharks do it in this game last night. And, I know a lot of people, when I say something like this, or at least some people are going to say, well, it's not really like due to a lack of effort, or it's not so much that they're not ready to start at the beginning of games. It's due to the fact that this team just doesn't have a lot of talent. And I understand that. And if that's your stance, that certainly has some merit. That definitely doesn't help. But don't tell me that you cannot possibly, if you're the New York Rangers, come out with a little bit more energy, a little bit more intensity than what we saw in this game, than what we've seen in the vast majority of Ranger games for the most part the entire season. I mean, certainly, the last, couple of months have been worse than the first couple of months in that department. But, I mean, come on. Can't you just go out there and just hit somebody, get in somebody's face? Let somebody know that the New York Rangers are in the building and we're going to make life difficult tonight. They never do that. They never do that. And we're going to go after Mike Sullivan a little bit for this too. For the most part, we haven't targeted Sullivan too much on this podcast. I mean, we'll say a couple things every once in a while about this lineup decision or that lineup decision or whatever it might be. But no, you know what? He bears some responsibility for this. And I will say, to preface this, that I blame Sullivan less than I blame certainly the players, and certainly less than Chris Drury. Chris Drury assembled this team. He blew up a team that won the President's Trophy, and now they might end up being the worst team in the NHL. Like, that is on the table. It might be hard for them to fall beneath the Canucks because the Canucks are just horrendous, and they're quite a few points even behind the Rangers. But right now, I'm pretty sure the Rangers are third to last in the NHL if you account for games that are in hand, right? So there's teams that might be behind the Rangers in the standings in the Western Conference, but they've also played fewer games. So I think right now, the way things stand, the Canucks might be the only team that does not control its own destiny to finish ahead of the Rangers in the playoffs. I would have to double check that, but you get the idea. Either way, they are right near the cellar not just of their division, not just of the Eastern Conference, the entire NHL. And that falls on Chris Drury quite a bit. It also falls on these players. There's a lot of guys that just aren't getting the job done. There's a lot of guys that are not living up to who they're supposed to be. There's a lot of overpaid players on this team. There's a lot of guys that just aren't getting it done. There's a lot of guys that aren't bringing the effort every single night, and it's obviously not good. And so that's why Drury bears a lot of the responsibility. And as far as the players not bringing the intensity, the energy of these games, that falls on the players as well. But Mike Sullivan isn't blameless. It is in the coach's job description to, at any level of any sport, it is in the coach's job description to have his team ready to go at the start of a game. If there's a random night in an 82-game season with the Rangers where they don't have it, they don't have the intensity, it's just one of those nights kind of thing, I can understand that. I understand that these guys are not hockey-playing robots. But the amount of times that this team is not ready to go at the opening faceoff is completely inexcusable. And yes, it falls on the players. It also, to me, falls on the coaching staff. And I know that there's also going to be some people that point out the fact that, well, this team quit on Laviolette, and before that, they quit on Gallant, and they never really got going under David Quinn. And again, that all has merit. But I don't care who you are. If you're the coach, you have to push the right buttons. You have to have your team ready to go. And this team is never ready to go. So maybe Mike Sullivan, instead of delivering the Gettysburg Address before every single game, can just say, go out there and kick their bleeping bleeps. Just say something to get your team a little bit fired up. And maybe he does do that. I don't know. But when we see these behind the scenes videos, he's just going on and on and on and on about almost nothing, And hey, he's a 2-time Stanley Cup winning coach, not me. So I get that. But at a certain point, with how bad this team has been playing and how little they seem to be responding to the message before the game, at a certain point, you have to change things up a little bit. Switch it up. Go with a different kind of message before a game. And again, maybe he is doing that. We don't know for sure. But whatever he's saying, whatever he's, preaching to this team, it doesn't feel like they're getting the message. And again, the lack of talent is one thing. That certainly does not help this team. But the lack of intensity, that just feeling that they are never ready to go, that's unacceptable. And that's on everybody, the players and the coaches. So let's go ahead and really break down this brutal start to the game here. The goal that made it 1-0. First of all, you have Mika Zibanejad taking a penalty 30 seconds into the game. We'll elaborate on the penalties a little bit later in today's episode. But then Sharks are on the power play, and they zip into the zone, and you've got Wenberg to Celebrini. The tip-in is stopped by Martin, but then the face-off is won, and you've got Celebrini scoring a goal for the Sharks, and JT Miller just decided to not cover Celebrini. Either that or just lost track of him. I mean, the Rangers were kind of scrambling a little bit in the defensive zone. The structure wasn't really there. And you got Celebrini on the doorstep. The pass goes across the crease, and JT Miller was guarding him until he just wasn't guarding him. And Celebrini's right there for a tip-in goal. And I know a lot of people, as a quick aside here, are going to say, why isn't Dylan Garand here? We got to call up Dylan Garand. I do think we'll see Dylan Garand before the season ends, and I think we should see Dylan Garand before the season ends. But they might wait until the very tail end of the season because this team is awful right now. And I think the last thing you want to do is throw a young goalie into the fire and have him try to figure it out. Martin, he let in these goals, but honestly, I don't think Martin has really played that bad, and I would not certainly put this loss on him. I'd probably blame just about everybody else before I would point the finger at Spencer Martin. But yeah, I mean, you call up Garand now, I really don't think that's going to go well. This is not the kind of environment where you want somebody making their NHL debut, especially at a position such as goalie. Then you've got the goal that makes it 2-0. The Sharks are on the power play again because Robertson shot the puck over the glass, because of course he did. This is pretty funny. This isn't the goal, but this happened early in the power play. You got Braden Schneider attempting to clear the puck out of the corner, and he hits Mika Zibanejad with it. So the puck stays in the zone, and the Sharks go back to work. Now, Mika did eventually clear during this whole sequence here, but the Sharks get it right back in, and the Rangers are just under fire this entire time. The puck is in the corner. You got Braden Schneider and Taylor Radish both getting outworked for a puck along the boards. There's a centering pass, 2-0, score by Regenda. And Gavrikov basically left the front of the net wide open. And by the way, at this point, it's 2-0 Sharks, and the shots on goal are 7-0. That's when you got the timeout by Sullivan. That's when you get all those faraway stares by the Rangers. We already talked about that, so let's keep going. The Rangers got a power play, and they were this close to giving up a shorthanded goal to Barclay Goodrow. And unfortunately, I don't know if Martin made the save or if Goodrow knocked it just wide on his tip-in try, but yeah, that's par for the course. I mean, the Rangers haven't given up a shorty, I don't think, all that recently, so they're way overdue to do that, because that was an epidemic for this team at the start of the year, and specifically when they were trying to go with 5 forwards on the power play. Then you've got the goal that makes it 3-0. You've got a terrible turnover by the Rangers, And you've got Smith centering for Celebrini, and Celebrini makes it 3-0. At this point, the Sharks are, the shots are 10-2 in favor of the Sharks. So we're midway through the first period. The Sharks have more goals than the Rangers have shots on goal. That's how you know you're off to a heck of a start. And JT Miller, again, God, has he been bad lately. He did not even try to defend anybody on this play. You know, he back checks, sort of, if you can even call it that, and just kind of parks himself just inside the Ranger blue line. He didn't try to jump into the play or defend anybody. It was really bad. And for everybody, all of us that were hopeful that JT Miller would pull the Rangers into the fight with him, yeah, he's pulling them somewhere. I don't know if it's into the fight, but he's definitely been pulling them somewhere recently. Okay, so I actually had to pause the episode for a brief second there because I wanted to go back and see which Ranger defenseman was responsible for this goal. I thought it was Susie, and indeed it was him. Susie is back skating into the Ranger zone. This is the goal that made it 3-0, and tried to force a pass across the ice to Will Borgen. It got tipped, and now it's just a complete scramble. A couple of passes later, and the puck ends up in the back of the Ranger net, and it's 3-0 in favor of the Sharks. And, you know, as a quick aside here, Macklin Celebrini, thank God the Rangers don't play the Sharks anymore, because if I have to watch another number 1 overall pick just skate circles around the entire Ranger team and dominate the game, I'm just going to lose. I just cannot deal with watching another number 1 overall pick as young as Macklin Celebrini just completely dominate the Rangers. Celebrini, in 2 games against the Rangers this season, has 5 goals and 2 assists, and the 1 assist was on the overtime game-winning goal for the Sharks at Madison Square Garden. And to compare him to his fellow first overall pick who competed in this game, Alexis Lafreniere, they are both players in the National Hockey League. That's where the similarities end. That's where they end. So we're going to keep everything going in a second here. We're going to shift our attention to the Rangers and their ungodly amount of terrible penalties that they took in this game. And this has really been a problem recently. I've been wanting to talk about this anyway. And hey, I mean, in a game where the Rangers take 7 penalties, give the Sharks 7 power play opportunities, no better time than now. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to go ahead and let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. If you ever hired someone who looked good on paper but was not the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posting on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your posts at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates much faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, let's go ahead and slaughter the Rangers for the amount of penalties that they took in this game. And let me also kind of point this out here before we dive into the individual penalties. Really none of them, or at least very few of them, were the result of any kind of like rough and tumble play, or you know how these games can be. You know, you can always, whether it's the Rangers or anybody else, at any level of hockey, really, you can have one of those games where the two teams just kind of pull each other down into the mud, and it just becomes one of those games. It becomes a little bit of a wrestling match. It feels like the entire game is like a 60-minute board battle. And as a result of this, everything gets chippy and everybody's, the temperature rises a little bit. And as a result of that, both teams end up taking more penalties than they otherwise might. You could also have a game where maybe the referees are calling things a little bit tight, and that also results in more penalties being taken. That's not why any of these penalties were taken by the Rangers. The Rangers took these penalties because they're clueless. Taking offense's zone penalties, that's usually a pretty bad start right there, because there's no threat of the opposition scoring when the puck is in the offensive zone. They are the result of the Rangers being lazy. It's hard to get in position and defend against this younger, hungrier team. So let's just hook them and grab at them instead and hope that, the referee just doesn't call it. You had penalties like that as well. And you had just overall bonehead penalties taken by the Rangers in this game. None of them were really the result of any of the things I mentioned a second ago, where you're just in a kind of a dogfight, grinded out kind of a game, and the temperature rises, and it's just the kind of game that you're in, right? I don't think that was really the result of any of the 7 penalties that the Rangers took in this game. And as we know, 7 power plays for the Sharks. They score on the first 2. They were up 2-0, and they never looked back. I got a kick out of this. I thought this was pretty funny. Kenny Albert, at one point in this game, when the Rangers were just kind of trudging through the third period, he mentioned that the Rangers have killed off the last 4 Sharks power plays. And it's nothing against Kenny, but I did kind of laugh when he pointed that out as like a positive, which, I mean, I guess, yeah, in a literal sense it is. If you kill off 4 straight power plays, that's a good thing. But isn't that part of the problem? I mean, first of all, they gave up 2 power plays to start the game. Now they've killed off 4 in a row, and it would end up being 5. But you're giving them all these penalties. You're giving them all these power plays, right? How are you supposed to come back in a game when you're playing the entirety of the game shorthanded? It can't be done. And again, it's not like this was the result of this being an ugly, nasty game. This is just the Rangers being lazy and just, dim-witted, basically. That's what it was. So let's call them all out for this. No, we're not going to spare anybody that took a penalty in this game. They're close to being in chronological order. I might have flip-flopped 1 or 2 of them, but I want to go back and look at all these penalties and just kind of have some thoughts on all of them. So the first one, I mentioned this very briefly earlier in today's episode, on Mika Zibanejad. Just a lazy penalty in the first minute of the game. The Rangers turn the puck over in the offensive zone. The Sharks go the other way, and Mika basically has to hook his guy and prevent him from getting to the net. And the Sharks obviously ended up scoring, and that put them up 1-0, barely a minute into the game. Then the second penalty, the second one that resulted in a power play goal for the Sharks, was taken by Matthew Robertson. Dude, this guy cannot get through a game without taking a penalty. I've never seen anything like this. It feels like he's constantly taking a penalty that he either doesn't need to take or, he put himself in a bad position. And as a result of that now he does need to take the penalty. But how about this? Robertson has now taken a penalty in all of the last 3 games, and he has taken at least 1 penalty in 7 of his last 13 games. The game before this, I think it was the game before this, either that or the one before that. All this bad hockey just blends together after a while. But the opposition was going in up the left side, and he had decent positioning, Robertson did. And he's going over there, and you think he's going to, take away the skater's path to the net. And instead, he just straight up tackles him. Like, he tackles him and takes a penalty for that. And in this game, it's even worse because he has the puck in the defensive zone, and he shoots it up over the glass and out of play, delay of game. Matthew Robertson was a fun story early in the season. The defensemen as a whole were a fun story early in this season because I think overall, early, the first 20, maybe the first 30 games, this group was overachieving and holding up quite a bit better than I think a lot of us thought that they would. Every single defenseman on this roster has taken a turn for the worse, Robertson included. Schneider's playing about as bad as I can ever remember. Gavrikov has not played well at all. That Schneider-Gavrikov pairing is not working. Borgen has been a mess. It's a win if Borgen can get through a game without falling down and that resulting in a goal for the opposition. But yeah, I mean, again, he just takes there's no reason for it. He shoots it up over the glass and out of play, and it's a delay of game penalty. And then you get 2 penalties taken by Will Borgen. One of them was basically he got burnt on his way to the net, so he didn't have any choice but to basically hook the guy. And another one, there was a rebound chance for the Sharks, and kind of the same thing. He has to take a penalty to prevent the stuff in try there. So 2 penalties on Borgen, obviously not good. You had a high stick on Taylor Radish. This one I'm trying to remember. I think this might have been in the offensive zone. But either way, again, control your stick. High sticking is not, it's going to happen from time to time. We understand that. But it's not a penalty that you should ever really feel like you need to take. More often than not, you just got careless with your stick. So Radish took the high sticking penalty. Then there was the one on Carson Soucy. And this one we mentioned very briefly earlier in the episode. Normally I would hate a penalty like this because it happened after the whistle. And you could say that it's undisciplined. He's going after one of his opponents and he's hitting him up high and putting him in a bear hug and all this stuff. Look, Carson Soucy probably should have gotten rewarded for drawing a penalty before this because right before this, he was thrown into the boards. I think Kenny Albert, or it might have been Boyle, one of them described it as like a wrestling move. But yeah, they took the guy, with his arm and basically slung him right into the boards there. And nothing was called there. So the whistle blows and Soucy wants to go after his guy and obviously ended up taking a penalty for that. You know what? At this point, anybody showing any emotion, anybody showing any kind of a pulse, anybody acting like they still have a desire to win this game, I'm not going to go after them for that. 9 times out of 10, I would not let this penalty. This one, I'm going to let it slide. And hey, Soucy's going to get traded in a couple of weeks anyway. So honestly, what does he even care at this point? You might as well get your money's worth. And then Gabe Perreault gets a penalty for elbowing in the offensive zone on Celebrini. Can't happen. It's an offensive zone penalty. You can't be taking these. I know they'll happen once in a while, but the amount of bad penalties that this team takes is just completely out of control. And it's one of those things, like there's so many other issues with this team and so much uncertainty surrounding the short-term and long-term future of this team, that something like this, a storyline like this, can kind of go under the radar a little bit. These penalties are out of control, both in quantity and quality, because they take so many that they just don't have to take. We could pretty much call it there. The only other bit of news that I figure I might as well mention here, especially for those of you that might have been about to attend this event, hopefully you've seen the news on this, but the Rangers Alumni Classic, which was scheduled for Sunday, is now canceled due to the impending winter storm. And it's really unfortunate. Sam Rosen was going to be back in the booth calling the game for MSG. You were going to have players like Adam Graves, Derek Stepan, Mike Richter, Girardi, Lundqvist, Stahl, Boyle, Avery. That could have been a good time, I think. Unfortunately, it's now canceled. And the question that the whole announcement kind of begs to me, I mean, first of all, I certainly understand them canceling it because it sounds like we're about to get just pounded with snow up here in the Northeast. But could they not have just postponed it? Like, could you not have rescheduled it? I know the Garden, I haven't looked at Madison Square Garden's schedule. I know that, maybe it's not easy to find a time to do this. And obviously then you have to get all the players to recommit to it. I mean, I don't know. Could you not have just moved this to a little bit later in the season? Do it at 11 o'clock at night if you have to. Do it at like 6 in the morning if you have to. Like, figure out a way to get on that rink and do the alumni game. But yeah, this has not been a fun season, and this is the latest example of it. This is the one game that I think a lot of people maybe were still looking forward to. But unfortunately, we're not going to have it because we're Ranger fans, and these last 2 seasons, we cannot have nice things. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.